everyone, I'm Pooja from Instagram handle Pooja's Crochet, and today I'm presenting the last headband of the Winter Cal 2020, which I'm doing with India Yarn Circle. And this is again a very different type of headband that we are doing. This is going to be done in a round, as in we have to use a circular needle. We go in rounds, so I'm gonna give you a small tutorial on how to do circular knitting in the round. And this is the type of pattern that we get. Let me start with the armamentarium that you need. First of all, the yarn required for this is specifically worsted weight, but I am going to be making it using two of these thinner sport weight looking yarns. I'm going to use a double thickness yarn. You will see how it goes about. I'm trying to make these in really Christmassy colors because the week that we are going to be making this is going to be the week before Christmas. Also with this you will need a 4.5 millimeter circular needle. For this particular project you need circular needles only. It is a little more advanced compared to the earlier projects that we have done, but it would be great if you can give it a try. If in case you do not have this size of a needle, you can still check the gauge with a different type of needle, and you use different type of yarn. The gauge that has to be met is for a 4-inch square. It has to be 18 stitches and 24 rows. I will mention this in the description, but if you're able to match this gauge with any other circular needle and yarn, then you can still come across with getting a average size headband. For this you will also need beads, because we are going to be making this project with beads in it. The beads, the use of beads is optional, but if you are using beads, then I must specify that the size of beads that you use to insert it into the knitting project, you need to use it with a crochet hook. Now I have used a size 1 millimeter crochet hook because I know that that fits into the hole of my bead which I'm using, and after this fits into the bead, you should be able to pick up your yarn with the crochet hook and pull it through from the bead. Only if this is possible, then you can use this particular bead. If you do not have a crochet hook, I'm going to be showing another variation also, in which you can use a large needle with a thread. I have used anchor thread over here, but again you have to make sure that you can go through completely through this through the hole in the bead, and that is only how you'll be able to do it. Now as we start this project, I have already gone through the process of cast on previously, so I'm going to start directly with 80 cast on stitches onto my needles. So I'll meet you after you have cast on 80 stitches onto your circular needle, and then I will show you how to join it in a round. I have now cast on 80 stitches onto this needle. So I'm going to go about what circular knitting actually is, knitting in the round. Earlier what we've always done is we've taken a straight needle and gone back and forth. Now in this, it's in this way where we go back and forth, but instead of going back and forth and creating a seam which you have to stitch together, we can go knitting in a round, continuous circles. This is usually used for making any circular pattern like a headband. It can be used for making sweaters, it can be used for making socks. It's really advantageous because you do not have to create a seam. You keep going in the round in the pattern, and then there's it's just really advantageous to do in many techniques. Now the earlier technique which used to be used for this type of sort of circular knitting was the use of 4 or 5 double pointed needles, which have points at both the ends, and that becomes a little difficult to use sometimes, managing with 4 needles. What we've come up with recently, what all the tutorials show, is the use of a circular needle using a magic loop. Now this particular needle is much bigger than the circumference of the headband which we are aiming at. So what we have to do is, to go in the round, we have to make sure that this needle and this needle is what we are using, forming a loop. Now let me show how this is done. first of all you have to go about midway length of the stitches that we have and just divide them at that point. Now since you have 80 stitches, you can count to about half, or you can just randomly approximately take the stitches to the other side. Normally what we would have done is, when we were with this particular end of our cast on, we would go back using these stitches back on this side. But now we don't want to use that. We want to go back to the new side and join that so that we can go in the round. So this side which does not have any stitches, which is the end, we have to take that to the needle point. So first we just pull this over the cord to the start, and this particular goes to the center of the. Now as you'll see, we have this loop formed over here at this end. Now what we actually need is that we want to take the stitches from the left hand needle onto the right hand needle. So what we need is a left hand needle with the stitches where we have to start, the right hand empty needle, and a loop where you have the rest of the stitches which are extra, which are just hanging across. The extra amount of cord is on one side, so there are 2 cords on each side. I'll give you a better idea of this. Now before we start with the next side, you have to make sure that our end where we are starting the next row has to be very visible. So one way of doing this is by putting a stitch marker. So you can use either a regular stitch marker that is available at the stores, or you can just make a loop out of thread and you can just use that. I've just made a loop out of any stash yarn, or you can even use a ring. You can just drop in the ring into the needle. I'm going to be using this thread, so I have put this across. So before we start with the next round, we know that this piece is going to come in the middle, which is going to be the differentiation between the next row. Now let me go about with the first knit for you all to get an idea. First of all, before you start the knit, you have to make sure that all your stitches are straight, so that you are ensuring that there's no fold. If there is a fold, then a twist is formed in this, which is not needed for this particular pattern. So first I have made sure that I have untwisted all these stitches. Now all our stitches are straight and the entire cast on is at the bottom. Okay, since it's a 2-color pattern, it may be a little difficult for you to see, but I'm going to go very slow at it for you to get a better idea. After we've put in our stitch marker, we have to go about our regular knit stitch. So I'm going from the needle to from the back to the front, but we have to take the yarn from the back, which is the yarn which is lying at that earlier loop that we have made. So you have to make sure that you do not take the end of the cast on, but you take the other yarn which is from your yarn ball. You wrap it around, wrap it a little tightly and pull it across the front. Make sure that you tighten this because this is how your seam will come. Then go about with a knit stitch all around. What we can also do is you can make alternate knit and purl, as I have done over here in my previous made headband, to get this ribbed pattern. So your next stitch will be a purl. So for this you have to take the yarn to the front of the needle and then purl. Since I'm using a double thread, that's why you have to make sure that both the pieces of thread are there. If you miss out on one, then it will be left out. And then next we go again from front to back, wrap the yarn around and pull through, take the yarn to the front, put it in across and pull through. So we alternate like this across the length, and you will get a better idea once we have completed this side on how this has got joined. With this alternating knit and purl stitches, I have reached the end of the row. This is only the first half of the row which I have taken on this needle. The other half is still lying on the outer loops that we have. So now what we have to do is I push this yarn back, and you will get a better idea of how we have formed a loop, which is now joined at both the ends. So what we can see is this yarn that we've put in, that is the start of our next row. So this part of the side which we have done of the second row, and here we haven't. Now again we go about midway and we pull this side of the yarn onto the working needle. This does look very cumbersome in the beginning, and it may be a little difficult to catch up on. You can go through many different tutorials which are there on how to do the magic loop technique if you find something more easy to do, but the basic point is that you have to work it in a round, make sure that your stitches don't slip off the needle, and just basically go across in the round, and it makes it much easier to work. You have to make sure that you have an extra piece of the loop on this side too, so that you have enough space to work. Now since the last stitch which I had finished up with was a purl, the next stitch on this side is a knit, because it is going to be a continuous line in the end. And right now when I make this, I'll be able to show you again how the two loops are on both the sides. Now when I have taken this and knit, the next one we have purled, as you can see that there are loops at both the ends. We have our working piece and there are loops at both the ends. So that is why it is called the magic loop, because we can work easily with just these two needles, and that extra loop lies on the side. This is how we go about with this. I'm going to quickly finish this row and then I'm going to show you how you see the next row. I now have just the last 3 stitches left. I've taken the yarn to the front. I'm going to purl this particular stitch, take the yarn to the back, knit the next stitch, and take the yarn to the front and purl the next stitch. Now as I can see that my stitch marker has come, the stitch marker is an indication that I'm starting my next row now. The stitch marker is supposed to be just slid off across to the working side, and just put this yarn across. This is the long tail, and now the next row that we are going to do is all knit, so that's why we ignore the fact that we have starting the next side. We have just slipped the needle, so we are aware of the fact that we have started our next row, but we have to just go about normally without leaving any gap. We don't have to turn, just go on and around and then knit continuously for the next row. As you can see, now our row is continuously going across. As we've reached the end of the needle, again we push all our stitches to the center of the needle. We've seen the round now as it's progressing. If we stretch it across, we will be able to see it is not going to bunch up like this. Again, we take about the center of the loop, pull it across, take the stitches to the working needle, I'm sure many people may find this particular project a little difficult. If you have any questions, you can DM me directly on Pooja's Crochet, or you can even text us on India Yarn Circle for any doubts that you have. Let me go across the entire tutorial once, and then we will see what we can do to help. Again, now this has come to the working side of the needle. We'll bunch it closer to the tip so that it's easier for us to work. And the yarn that we have just used, where we have our working thread, that is pushed to the center, so that a center of the loop, so that we have our working loop over here. The last, as I told you, this particular row is all knit. This last piece of yarn is over here. We leave it lying. We take the needle from the front to the back, wrap it around just as we do a normal knit. Keep it a little tight because we don't want a snag over here, and we just pull it across, hold it tight over here, put into the next stitch, knit it as usual, and then we go about just as we always did. As you see, as we progress further, you will not be able to see a join. For this particular stitch pattern that we are doing, we have a border of 3 rows. The first, as you saw, we did an alternating knit and purl. The second row which we are doing is all knit, and the third row you have to again repeat a knit and purl. Now I'll be meeting you in a few seconds after you have completed the first 3 rows. That is the first row of knit and purl alternating, the second row of all knit, and the third row of all knit and purl alternating. So I'm going to come back with that. So I've continued the border pattern for the last 3 rows, and now this is the last stitch. So I'm taking the yarn to the back after slipping the stitch marker. Now the next 6 rows involves the pattern that we are using to form this bow sort of shape along with the bead slip. For this particular pattern, we have to knit the first 5. So it is 1 and 2, 3, 4 and 5 stitches are knit. After that, we take the yarn to the front and we have to slip purl wise the next 5 stitches. So with the yarn in front, this is purl wise slipping. I will show you what knit wise stitching is. If you're told to knit slip it knit wise, then we slip it from the front, putting the needle from the front to the back. But here, since we've been told to slip it purl wise, we just directly slip them through. We are slipping 5 stitches purl wise. Then we take the yarn to the back, keeping it a little loose. We don't want to tighten it too much. And after that, we knit the next 5 stitches. Again, we do the same thing. This looks like a bar over here. We will see at the end of these 6 rows why we've made a bar like that. Okay, my stitches have slightly got stretched out because I've not been careful. Now again, we take the yarn to the front and slip the next 5. After taking this, we take the yarn again to the back and knit the next 5 stitches. This is the sequence that we have to follow for this particular row. Knit 5, slip 5 stitches purlwise, knit the next 5. Since we have 80 stitches in the circle, we have to do this pattern repeat accordingly, and we will still be left with the proper number of stitches. After this row, the next row is a regular knit, and the row 6 and 8, so this is row 4, 6 and 8 have to be done the same way of alternating knit and slip stitches, and the row 5 and 7 are to be knit. So we can follow it accordingly, and I'll see you at the end of that to show you how to slip in the beads. So at the end of making the pattern, as I had mentioned, the first 3 rows were the border. The 4th, 6th and 8th rows were ones where we did 5 stitches of knitting and 5 stitches of slipping purlwise, and the 5th and the 7th row was knit. After that, the 9th row is where we join it and put in the bead like this. So I have completed a few repeats of putting in the bead. So now in this particular segment, a couple of repeats, I'm going to show you how to attach the bead. These next 2 stitches are supposed to be knit. Now the bead is supposed to be put in to the middle stitch. So we have 5 stitches over here. Out of that, the middle stitch is going to be the one which joins these 3 and puts in the bead. So we have to knit the next 2 stitches. The first one that we attach the bead, I'm going to show you using a crochet hook. There are 2 techniques which I'm going to show on how to attach the bead, but the first one I'm going to be showing using a 1mm crochet hook. Now, as you've seen, my crochet hook is fitting through my bead. It has to go in through the hole in the bead very easily. So this particular crochet hook is going. I've held the bead onto the crochet hook. Now the knit is done in such a way that I have picked up the last 3 bands which are formed, horizontal bars. I am taking the needle from the front to the back, pulling it across and taking it from below all the 3 stitches, so that I have taken all the 3 stitches together. So now this is how a sort of bow has been formed. Now if we want to take this bead and attach it in, I am taking this off the needle. You have to just hold it very securely. I'm going to take it in such a way that both these pieces of yarn are held onto this needle very tightly, and I have to just make sure that it goes through the bead. Loop out, as in the bead has been inserted into the loop. We slip it onto the needle and a stitch is formed. As you've seen, we have taken up all the horizontal bars onto this, and then we will continue to knit the last 2 stitches. So this is the bow that has been formed. I'll show it to you again, and this time we are going to be taking a different technique of taking up the loop. So for this particular segment that we are using, I'm going to be showing you how to do it with a needle and a thread. So I've used some anchor thread and I'm using a needle. I'm going to be taking a bead and putting it through this needle here, and there is no knot on this needle at all. I'm going to leave it as this, and then we are going to go ahead. So let's first knit the first 2 stitches like this. Now the next stitch is where we take it from below all these 3 horizontal bars, and then front to the back, knit it again, take it through down. Okay, and again we have this loop formed. We take the needle, insert it through this yarn, I take it across and it's out. We don't pull it out completely. I am going to put the needle back through this and pull it out so that we have a loop formed. Okay, now this loop is formed like this. When we pull it through from here, we will have this yarn out of the needle. So we have the loop out, and then I pull this yarn across, and then when I attach it here, I have my bead inserted into the stitch. The last two. I have one more repeat where I can show you how this is done, and I'm going to again show it to you with the needle and the yarn, because I find that to be a little more easier. Again, the technique that you use, how easy or difficult you find, it will depend on the size of the beads you're using, because if you are using larger beads with larger holes, you may find it really easy to go in through the hook. But if you're using smaller size beads, they fit more snugly onto your pattern. That's why I decided to go with the needle and thread. I'm going to just knit these last few stitches. There are many different types of techniques on how to insert beads into a knit. Those are also available on YouTube. So if you want to try some different technique, you can go through some different YouTube tutorials. If you have any suggestions on how it can be done, you can drop in a comment here, or you can put it on social media, which will be easier for us to tag you and share it as a post. I have come to the middle stitch again, and before I go into making the knit, let me take one bead and just insert it into the needle and keep it ready. After that, I will go below these 3 bars and then knit this stitch and then take it across. I have formed my knit. I'm taking this needle and thread as it is, taking it through this loop, pulling it across. Make sure that when you're doing all this, all your other stitches are secure and they do not fall off the needle, because otherwise you may find it difficult to do it again. I have taken this through, and I have my, as you can see, the loop is formed. I just have to push this loop through over here to pull out. I can just insert it back here, and after that take my needle and pull it through so that my yarn is securely on the needle at this stage. After that, I have only the last 2 stitches to be knit. Now I have finished across making this sort of a pattern. This is one single repeat that we have of making these 6 rows to form this sort of a bow pattern. Now for the next repeat, we have to make it in such a way that this particular pattern comes to this side of the this side of the pattern. So now our next entire segment will be where this bead is in the middle section, which we've kept just as knit. So for that, after our stitch marker, in the earlier repeat we had knit the first 5 stitches, but instead of that, now the first 5 stitches will be slip purlwise with the yarn at the front of the work. After that is done, we just space it out a little so that the yarn is not stretched out too much, and then we knit the next 5 stitches as usual. You may find it a little difficult to knit the one with the bead, but that's how it gets secure. And see, now this is one mistake that can happen. You have to make sure that you go through both the loops and take both the yarn and across. And again, we finished our 5 stitches of knit. We take it to the front and slip the next 5. So this time when we form, this is our first row of where the bar is made. After that, the next row is going to be a full knit. The subsequent will be this. So that is the 10th, the 12th and the 14th row is the one with the bar. The 11 and 13 will be complete knit, and the row after that you will again pull up the loop in this way, attaching a bead. That will be your second repeat, and then after that we have again a third repeat, which is exactly like this. So above this there will be a repeat where we knit the first 5 and then have a slip attaching the bead. So this particular complete pattern will look like this, where the first one is in this way, the second one will come between these two, and the third one again in the same row as this. After that, the last 3 stitches involve the repeat of the border that we have done. Since we are using this in a circular, you will be able to see that it's a very complete round in this. You will not need to sew in the edges as we had done earlier, and at the same time it will give a very uniform look. When you sew in the edges, that time you will not even realize where you have your border formed, and that's how it makes it even more uniform, making the entire thing. I think as I have shown the repeat of how the border is made, one, it's a knit and purl repeat followed by a knit row and a knit and purl repeat. This particular pattern is formed by slipping 5 stitches and knitting 5 stitches alternatively, and after that how I showed you on how to put in the bead. So this is a 3-row repeat. This particular stitch pattern needs to have 80 stitches in which are cast on initially to make this sort of a pattern. But if in case you are looking at using any other needle and yarn, you can still alter it by increasing it or decreasing it by 10 number of stitches, because that is one single repeat. 5 plus 5, which gives you 10. I am going to attach a picture of this completed headband, which is a very Christmassy looking headband, at the end of this video. If you have any doubts, you can DM me on Pooja's Crochet or on India Yarn Circle, either on Instagram or Facebook. And if you have any questions, you can also put in your comments here. And I hope you enjoy knitting this one. This is the last part of the Winter Cal 2020, which is making of 5 headbands. I hope you enjoy making all 5, and please do share your pictures and tag us on social media for us to be able to see your pictures. Thank you. Bye bye.